The night her ex-husband got down on one knee at table 9, Adaeze was in the back of the kitchen washing plates. She heard the applause first. It came through the swinging kitchen door like a wave, soft at the edges, sharp in the middle. She lifted her head. She wiped her hands on her apron. She walked to the small round window in the door and looked through it. She saw him, Chukwuma, the man who took the house on Banana Island, the man who took the 28 years she had poured into his construction empire, the man whose name was on every deed, every account, every share certificate, every piece of paper that a court could recognize. She saw him slide a ring onto the finger of a woman half her age. She saw the diamond catch the candlelight. She saw the dining room stand up and clap. Adaeze did not cry. She did not walk out. She did not scream his name across the restaurant. She turned around. She wiped her hands again. She went back to the stack of dirty plates, and she washed the next one. But before that Saturday night was finished, before the champagne was empty, before the couple at table 9 stood up to leave, Adaeze and Nkechi Okonkwo would send one plate out from that kitchen. One plate. And what she left on that table, and what she wrote on the small folded paper beside it, would be talked about in the corridors of Lagos society for years afterwards. This is a story about a woman who owned nothing on paper, and everything that mattered underneath it. The kitchen at Cassava Palm ran at 39 degrees Celsius on a Saturday night in the dry season. The exhaust fans above the grill pulled the smoke of grilled tilapia and suya spice up toward the ceiling, but never fast enough. The air carried everything at once. Palm oil hitting a hot cast iron pan, Scotch bonnet peppers cracking under heat, the sharp edge of ginger from a marinade on Station 3. Underneath it all, the chemical smell of industrial soap and water hot enough to leave marks on a woman's hands. Cassava Palm sat on Ozumba Mbadiwe Avenue in Victoria Island, Lagos. Modern West African fine dining. 21 years in operation. It had survived a currency crash, 2 ownership changes, 1 armed robbery in 2011, and a fire in the pantry in 2016 that shut it down for 5 months. The dining room seated 74. The kitchen held 11 staff on a full Saturday rotation. The dishwashing station sat at the very back, closest to the service door, farthest from the pass where the plated food went out to the customers. Adaeze stood at that station. She had been standing there since 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was now 9:17. Her hands were red from the water. Not sunburned, heat-stained. 5 months of water at 62 degrees Celsius will do that to any pair of hands, no matter how young or how old. Her apron had been white at the beginning of the shift. By 9 o'clock, it was streaked with efo-riro sauce and jollof grease and whatever came back on the plates. Her shoes were slip-resistant black, the soles worn smooth at the heels from standing on tile for 8 hours at a time. She knew the name of every dish on the Cassava Palm menu. She knew which pans the line cooks needed back first. She knew the turnaround time for a full rack. 7 minutes to wash, 3 minutes to steam dry, 45 seconds to sort and stack. She knew these things because she had done them 6 nights a week for 5 months. And she knew them because Adaeze Nkechi Okonkwo had spent 28 years of her life learning how to keep a system running without anyone noticing she was the one running it. In a professional kitchen, the dishwasher is the lowest position. Nobody trains for it. Nobody dreams of it. But nothing moves without it. No clean plates means no food leaves the pass. No clean pans means the line comes to a stop. The dishwasher is the floor the whole building stands on. Most people in the dining room do not think about the floor. Adaeze did not think about the dining room. She thought about the next rack. She thought about the water temperature. She thought about keeping her station clear so the busboy had somewhere to put the tubs when they came back heavy. She worked the way she had always worked. Quiet, steady, invisible. She had not planned to be here tonight. She had not planned to be here at all. But 5 months ago, planning had stopped being something Adaeze and Nkechi Okonkwo had the luxury of doing. 5 months earlier, Adaeze had been living in a 6-bedroom house on Banana Island, in the wealthiest postcode in all of Lagos. The house had a marble driveway. It had a swimming pool she had never once swum in. It had a chef's kitchen that opened out onto a terrace overlooking the lagoon. It had a wine cellar Adaeze had helped design in 2011 with an Italian architect flown in from Milan for 3 days. She had lived in that house for 22 years. She had married Chukwuma Emeka Okonkwo when she was 30 years old. He was 33. Charming, ambitious. A civil engineer who had left his father's small construction outfit in Enugu and built his own firm in Lagos, from a single-site office on Adeola Odeku Street into one of the most connected mid-sized construction companies in the country. He had a handshake people remembered. He had a voice that made rooms go quiet when he spoke. Adaeze was from Onitsha in Anambra State. She had come to Lagos at 24 with a first-class degree in economics from the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. She had a place waiting for her in a graduate scheme at a merchant bank on the mainland. She never took it. Chukwuma's firm needed someone to manage the books, to keep the accounts clean, to keep the payroll running while he chased contracts. He said it made more sense to keep it in the family. She agreed. She was 27 and in love, and it made sense at the time. She managed the books. She raised 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. She cooked every client dinner. She organized every site opening. She entertained every investor, every partner, every commissioner, every state governor's aide, every foreign consultant who came through that front door on Banana Island, expecting a meal and a conversation and a soft landing after a long flight, and leaving with all 3. Her name was on none of it. Not on the firm, not on the accounts, not on the deed to the house, not on the 2 smaller houses in Enugu they used for weekend retreats, not on the fleet of company vehicles, not on the shares in the sister company they set up in 2009 with a partner from Port Harcourt. In 28 years of marriage, Adaeze cooked more than 5,000 dinners. She hosted more than 300 client events. She planned birthday parties for the children of ministers whose names she had memorized from Chukwuma's contact book. Every major contract Chukwuma closed began with a meal Adaeze prepared, a table Adaeze set, and a room Adaeze made warm. She was the reason people stayed past dessert. She was the reason they called back the following week to say their wife had not stopped talking about the pepper soup. Nobody paid her for any of it. There was no title, no salary, no equity, no acknowledgement in any filing or any annual report. She did not ask for one because that is not how she was raised in Onitsha, and because she believed the marriage itself was the acknowledgement. She believed they were building the same thing. She had brought one thing from Onitsha that Chukwuma never touched: a recipe book. Dark brown leather cover, soft from years of handling. 230 pages, every one of them filled with her grandmother's script. Grandma Nnedi Okafor had died when Adaeze was 29. She left behind no money, no land, no accounts. She left behind that book. Igbo recipes written in blue biro and pencil across 4 decades. Egusi soup, ofe nsala, isi ewu, nkwobi, ukwa, abacha, ofada rice with ayamase sauce. Recipes that had no measurements, only instructions. Like a small pinch of this and enough of that, and you will know when it smells right. And in the margins, small notes in her grandmother's Igbo dialect. This one for a hungry man. This one for a woman who has just lost something. This one for a wedding. Adaeze kept the book in the kitchen drawer on Banana Island, next to the stove, for 22 years. She opened it almost every day. She cooked from it almost every night. The pages smelled of palm oil and dried crayfish and uziza leaf, the smell of her grandmother's kitchen in Onitsha on a Sunday afternoon after church. Chukwuma walked past that drawer 10,000 times. He never opened the book. He never asked what was inside it. She signed papers over the years. She signed them because she trusted him. She did not read every page. She would later learn what was on those pages. Chukwuma started planning the divorce 14 months before he served the papers. He did not tell Adaeze. He did not tell the children. He told his lawyers. He told his accountant. He told Ifoma Basi, 31 years old, a junior associate at his firm who had started 3 years earlier, and who saw in Chukwuma what Adaeze had once seen, before she understood what was underneath it. His legal team spent 14 months restructuring everything that could be restructured. The house on Banana Island had gone through a title correction 4 years before the papers were served. The new certificate of occupancy carried one name: Chukwuma Emeka Okonkwo. Adaeze had signed the correction documents. She remembered the biro in her hand. She remembered the conference room on Kingsway Road. She did not remember anyone explaining to her that she was signing the house away. The business accounts were reorganized so that her 28 years of bookkeeping, of client hosting, of operational support, of unpaid consulting on 20 different contracts were invisible in the records. The savings, 380 million naira built up over 2 decades, were moved into an offshore trust in Chukwuma's name alone. The investment portfolio was locked behind beneficiary designations that named him and only him. The dollar accounts in Mauritius, the Eurobond holdings, the stake in the Ikoyi land deal from 2018. Every piece of it was legal. Every piece of it was deliberate. Every piece of it was done while Adaeze was still cooking dinner for his clients and still believing they were building the same life. The joint naira account had 9 million naira in it. That was the one thing his team did not move. Not because they chose to leave it, because it was small enough that moving it would have triggered a notification before the papers were ready. By the time Adaeze's lawyer got involved, Chukwuma's team had a 14-month head start. The lawyer looked at the documents for 2 hours. Then she looked at Adaeze. She did not say much. She did not need to. The structure was clean. The transfers were legal. The outcome had already been decided long before Adaeze knew there was any decision being made. 9 million naira, an old Toyota Camry, her clothes, her grandmother's recipe book. That was what 28 years came to. The papers were served on a Tuesday afternoon and the harmattan season. Adaeze was in the kitchen slicing ugu leaves for a dinner she had been planning for one of Chukwuma's investors from Dubai. She heard the gate intercom. The house steward opened it. A man in a gray shirt walked up the drive with a brown envelope. He asked to speak to Mrs. Okonkwo directly. She wiped her hands on the tea towel. She went to the door. She took the envelope. She stood in the doorway and read the first page. She did not read past the first page. She already knew. She went back to the kitchen. She turned the gas off. She put the knife down. She washed her hands slowly, one finger at a time. She dried them on the tea towel. She folded the tea towel and placed it beside the sink. She packed one suitcase, clothes, the recipe book, a framed photograph of her grandmother she kept on the bedside table, a small wooden carving her father had given her the day she left Onitsha for Lagos in 1993. She did not pack anything from the sitting room. She did not pack anything from the study. She did not pack any of the jewelry Chukwuma had bought her for birthdays and anniversaries, because she did not know whose name those receipts were in either. She put the suitcase in the boot of the Camry. She sat in the driver's seat. She did not start the car for 14 minutes. She did not know where she was going. She would figure that out in the morning. That night, she drove to a small service department on Adaeze Jones in Ikeja and paid 35,000 naira for a week in a room that smelled of air freshener and someone else's perfume. She set the recipe book on the bedside table. She did not open it. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. She had 9 million naira in an account that would be frozen within 7 days. She had a car with 187,000 kilometers on it. She had no job history, no CV, no professional references. 28 years of full-time work that existed in no system, no HR file, no LinkedIn profile, no tax return in her name. She was 58 years old. She applied to 4 places in the first week: a boutique on Awolowo Road, an office supply firm in Yaba, a small event planning company in Lekki Phase 1, a catering outfit in Ikoyi. All 4 of them said they would be in touch. None of them called back. A 58-year-old woman with no verifiable employment history and no professional references does not get callbacks in Lagos. That is not cruelty. That is how the system works when you have spent 28 years building somebody else's system instead of your own. 3 weeks later, she saw a handwritten sign in the window of a restaurant on Ozumba Mbadiwe Avenue in Victoria Island. Dishwasher needed. Inquire within. The service department on Adaeze Jones was not meant for long stays. The walls were thin enough to hear the generator when NEPA cut power. The car park filled with different vehicles every night. Adaeze kept the room clean because that is what she did. She made the bed every morning, even though the cleaner would have done it. She folded her clothes and set them in the small wardrobe by the window. She kept the small bathroom counter wiped down. She kept the small things in order because the large things were no longer hers to keep. Every night, she opened the recipe book. Not to cook. There was no proper kitchen, only a small electric hob and a mini fridge that hummed too loud. She opened the book because her grandmother's handwriting was the only familiar thing she had left. She turned the pages slowly. She read instructions she had memorized decades ago. Egusi soup. Start the palm oil low. Let the crayfish speak first. The egusi seeds should thicken like they are shy, slowly. Add the ugu last, or you will kill the color. That was how Grandma Nettie wrote. Not in grams and cups, in smells, in sounds. In the moment the color changed and you knew. Adaeze read those pages the way some people read letters from the dead. Not for information, for company. The joint account was frozen on the 9th day. She had withdrawn 6 million naira in cash before it locked. She had that, and the car, and the book, and nothing else that could be converted into a life. She walked into Cassava Palm on a Wednesday morning. The sign in the window still said, "Dishwasher needed." She asked for the manager. She did not have a CV. She told them she could start immediately. She was clean. She was punctual. She was quiet. She would show up every night and she would not complain. The manager looked at her twice. He was in his 40s. He had seen many kinds of desperate people walk into his restaurant. He had never seen a 58-year-old woman in a well-cut gray dress and pearl earrings ask to wash dishes. He did not ask her why. He told her to come back the next morning at 10 with her identity card and a passport photograph. She started the next morning. That was 5 months ago. Cassava and Palm ran on a system. Every position in the kitchen had a place and a rank and a purpose. The dishwasher sat at the bottom. Above the dishwasher was the prep cook. Above the prep cook was the line cook. Above the line cook was the sous chef. Above the sous chef was the head chef. That was the order. That was how it had been since the French named it the brigade system 200 years ago, and it had not changed much since. Not in Paris, not in New York, not in Lagos. Adaeze learned the system by watching it. She watched the prep cooks arrive at 2 in the afternoon and begin cutting vegetables in silence. She watched the line cooks take their stations at 4 and check their mise en place. She watched the sous chef walk the line before service and inspect every station without saying much. She watched the head chef stand at the pass and call orders and plate food and send it out and never once raise his voice. She learned the rhythm. She learned the language. 86 meant something was gone. Behind me meant someone was walking past you with hot food. Corner meant someone was coming round a blind spot. Herd meant you understood the order. Fire on 2 meant start the mains for table 2 right now. She filed every one of these into her memory the way she had once filed the seating preferences of Chukwuma's business partners across 28 years of dinner parties. She started writing things down. In the back pages of her grandmother's recipe book, past the last written page, in the blank white space Grandma Nettie had never filled, Adaeze began to keep notes. How the kitchen moved. What each station needed and when. How the timing worked between starters and mains. How a full dining room of 74 could be fed in 90 minutes if every single person did their part. Nobody asked her to write any of this down. She did it because she had spent 28 years managing a system nobody had acknowledged, and she recognized another system when she saw one. Blessing Oluwaseun Adebayo was 43 years old. Line cook, 9 years at Cassava and Palm. She was the first person who spoke to Adaeze outside of work. It happened in the small courtyard behind the kitchen during a break in Adaeze's 3rd week. Blessing smoked 1 cigarette per shift. She offered Adaeze the space next to her on the low concrete wall. They stood in the courtyard without speaking for 2 minutes. Then Blessing said she had been at Cassava and Palm longer than anyone except the chef, and that the last 4 dishwashers had quit within a month. Adaeze said she was not planning to quit. Blessing looked at her. She did not ask why. She finished her cigarette and went back inside. Over the next 2 months, Blessing became the person Adaeze spoke to. Not about everything. Not about the divorce or the house or the money. About the small things. The shift. The menu. The customers who sent plates back. The customers who cleaned their plates and said nothing, which Blessing said was always better than a compliment in a Lagos restaurant. Adaeze told Blessing about Chukwuma after 2 months. She told her on a Tuesday night while they were breaking down the kitchen after service. She did not tell the whole story. She told enough. Blessing listened without interrupting. When Adaeze finished, Blessing said one thing. She said she was sorry that it happened. Then she picked up a bus tub and carried it to the dish station, and that was the end of the conversation. Some weeks, Adaeze cooked the staff meal. Every restaurant has one. The meal the kitchen eats together before service starts. It is usually made from whatever needs to be used up before it turns. Trimmings, leftovers, the parts of the animal the menu does not want. Adaeze did not follow the cassava and palm recipes. She followed her grandmother's. She made jollof from scraps of tomato paste and offcuts of chicken thigh, and she made it in the smoky, slow way from Onitsha, not the party jollof way from Lagos. She made pepper soup from fish heads the line cooks would otherwise have thrown away. She made ofada rice with a small bowl of ayamase on the side that had the specific bitterness of iru, fermented locust bean, the way her grandmother had made it, the way nobody in a Victoria Island restaurant had ever tasted it. Nobody knew where the recipes came from. They just knew the dishwasher's staff meal tasted different. Blessing ate it and looked at Adaeze across the prep table, but did not say anything. The head chef noticed. He did not say so. He watched her work for 6 weeks before he said a single word to her that was not about plates. Babatunde Adekunle Ojo was 62 years old. He had been the head chef at Cassava and Palm for 18 years. Born in Abeokuta, raised by an aunt in Ibadan who cooked for a Baptist church congregation of 400 people every Sunday and never wrote a single recipe down in her whole life. Chef Tunde started washing dishes at a hotel in Ikoyi when he was 16 because he needed money and because the kitchen was the only place that would hire a boy who had run away from home. He learned to cook the way Adaeze's grandmother had learned to cook, by standing next to someone who knew how, by watching hands, by listening for the sound of oil at the correct temperature, by smelling when ginger had gone 1 second too far. He worked his way from dishwasher to prep cook in 2 years, from prep cook to line cook in 3, from line cook to sous chef in 4, from sous chef to head chef at a restaurant in Ikeja when he was 38. By the time he took the top position at Cassava and Palm, he had trained 12 cooks in his career. He had fired more than that. He did not waste time on people who treated the kitchen like a job. He spent time on people who treated it like a language they already knew but had not yet learned to speak. He watched Adaeze cut onions for the staff meal one afternoon. She did it without looking at the blade. She did it with a rhythm that came from repetition so deep it had become automatic. She held the knife the way someone holds a tool they were given by a person, not by a classroom. He walked over to her station after the meal. He stood next to her for a moment, without speaking. Then he said one sentence. "That is not how somebody who learned from a cookbook cuts an onion. That is how somebody who learned from her grandmother cuts an onion." Adaeze looked at him. She did not respond. He did not wait for a response. The next evening after service, Chef Tunde told Adaeze to stay. He handed her an apron, not the dishwasher's apron, a prep apron. He pointed to the open station at the end of the line and told her to dice tomatoes. She diced them. He looked at the cuts. He said one word, again. She diced them again. He looked. Better. That became the pattern. After her dishwashing shift ended, Adaeze stayed. Chef Tunde taught her station work. He taught her sauces. He taught her how to plate. He taught her heat control and timing, and the difference between a dish that was cooked and a dish that was finished. He never once said she was good at it. He said again, and better, and not yet. Those were his only feedback. He told her one night that every great chef he had ever known had started at the bottom. He told her that the dishwasher sees the whole kitchen because nobody watches the dishwasher. He told her that was an advantage most people wasted. Adaeze did not waste it. 6 weeks after Chef Tunde began teaching her, Adaeze cooked a full dish in the Cassava and Palm kitchen for the first time. She opened her grandmother's recipe book to a page near the middle. She had not cooked this dish since before the divorce. She followed the instructions Grandma Nettie had written in blue biro 31 years ago. Palm oil warmed slow. Locust bean pressed between the fingers until the aroma released. Uziza leaves torn by hand at the end. A finish of ehuru, the calabash nutmeg her grandmother had insisted was the difference between a good pot and a pot people remembered. The smell filled the kitchen inside a minute. It moved through the air like something that had been waiting a long time to be released. Blessing stopped what she was doing. She stood at her station with a towel in her hand and looked toward Adaeze's station. Chef Tunde stood at the pass. He did not say a word. He watched Adaeze plate the dish. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Adaeze had been invisible for 28 years in a house where she built everything. She had been visible for 6 weeks in a kitchen where she owned nothing. She did not know yet how much that visibility was about to cost her, and how much it was about to return. The kitchen was running full speed on a Saturday night in the middle of the dry season when Adaeze heard the laugh. She was at the dish station. Her hands were in the water. The steam was rising. The kitchen noise was loud enough to cover most sounds from the dining room, but not that sound. Not that specific laugh. She knew it the way you know a sound that has lived inside your house for 28 years. It was not loud. It was not forced. It was the laugh Chukwuma used when he wanted a room to feel comfortable. The one he saved for clients, for investors, for state officials, for people he wanted something from. She had heard it across dinner tables and living rooms and hotel lobbies for more than 2 decades. She lifted her hands out of the water. She dried them slowly on her apron. She did not turn round immediately. She stood still for a few seconds. Then she walked to the kitchen door. The door had a small window, a porthole made of thick glass, no bigger than a dinner plate. She looked through it. Table 9, the corner table, the one with the best view of the lagoon through the tall windows on the far side of the dining room. Chukwuma Emeka Okonkwo sat facing the water. He wore a dark navy agbada with fine gold embroidery at the collar. His wristwatch caught the candlelight. Across from him sat Ifeoma Bassi. She wore a red off-shoulder dress, her hair pulled back in a low bun. The table had a bouquet of white lilies that Adaeze recognized, the same florist Chukwuma had used for every anniversary since 2003. It had candles that were not part of the restaurant's standard setup. A bottle of French champagne was already open. 2 glasses poured. This was not a regular dinner. The table told the story before anyone at it said a word. Adaeze looked through that glass for 7 seconds. Then she turned round. She walked back to the sink. She picked up a plate. She washed it. She did not know yet that he was about to get on one knee. She did not know yet that she would be washing the dishes from his engagement dinner before the night was over. The proposal came at 9:42. Adaeze was not looking through the window when it happened. She heard it. The dining room went quiet first. That particular quiet that falls over a Lagos restaurant when something is happening at one table that everyone else has stopped to watch. Then a voice, Chukwuma's voice, too low to make out the words through the kitchen door. But the tone was unmistakable. The careful tone, the rehearsed tenderness. Then the sound that followed, a gasp from the table, a pause that lasted long enough for a ring to go onto a finger. Then applause. The whole dining room, 60, 70 people, clapping for 2 strangers at a corner table who had just agreed to spend their lives together. The sound of applause moved through the kitchen door and filled the space where Adaeze was standing with her hands in a sink full of hot water and dirty plates. The line cooks kept working. The sous chef kept calling orders. But Blessing stopped. She looked at Adaeze across the kitchen. She knew who was at table 9. Adaeze had mentioned his name once, 2 months earlier, and Blessing had not forgotten it. Blessing walked to the dish station. She stood beside Adaeze. The applause was still going in the dining room. Champagne glasses were clinking. Someone was laughing. Blessing leaned in close enough to speak under the noise. "Do you want to go home?" Adaeze did not look up from the sink. "I have 3 more hours on my shift." Blessing stood there for another moment. Then she went back to her station. You might expect her to walk out. You might expect a scene. Adaeze Nkechi Okonkwo did neither. She washed the next plate. She loaded the next rack. She kept the station clean and the turnaround fast. And she did not look through the window in the kitchen door again. But she had already decided something. She had decided it the moment she heard his laugh through the kitchen door. She just had not told anyone yet. Adaeze walked to the back of the kitchen, past the prep stations, past the dry storage shelves. She pushed open the heavy door of the walk-in cold room and stepped inside. She pulled the door shut behind her. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in one step. The air was still. The hum of the compressor was the only sound. Shelves of vegetables and fish and sealed containers of stock lined both walls. The light was a single fluorescent tube. White. Flat. No warmth in it. She stood between the shelves and did not move. The kitchen noise was gone. The dining room applause was gone. The sound of Chukwuma's laugh was gone. In here, there was only the cold and the hum and the space to stand still without anyone needing anything from her. She thought about the last meal she cooked in the house on Banana Island, 3 weeks before the papers came, a Tuesday night. She made ofe ensala from her grandmother's recipe, the white soup, the one you make when someone in the family has just recovered from a long illness or is about to travel far away. She had made it 100 times before. She made it that night the way she always made it. Slowly, with care. With utazi leaves cut fine at the very end so the bitterness would only kiss the surface, not sink. Chukwuma ate the whole plate. He did not say anything about it. He had not said anything about her cooking in years. He ate it. He put the plate in the sink. He went to his study and closed the door. She washed the plate. She dried it. She put it away. That was the last meal she made for him. She stood in the cold room for 3 minutes. She was not making a plan. She was not weighing options. She was arriving at something that had already been decided the moment she heard the laugh through the kitchen door. She was just catching up to it. She was going to cook one more thing. Not for revenge, not to make a scene. She was going to make one dish. One dish. The last one. To close 28 years on her own terms. Not his. Not the lawyers. Not the courts. Hers. She pushed the cold room door open. The heat of the kitchen hit her face. She walked through the line. She found Chef Tunde at the pass. She asked him one question. "Chef, can I use Station 6 for 10 minutes? He looked at her for a long time before he answered. Chef Tunde did not ask why. He did not ask what had happened in the dining room. He looked at Adaeze, and he saw something in her face that he understood without explanation. He had spent 18 years reading kitchens. He could read people the same way. He stepped to the side of the pass. He pointed to the open station at the end of the line. He said one word. Go. Adaeze walked to the station. She opened her locker in the corner of the changing area and took out the recipe book. The dark brown leather cover was soft in her hands. She carried it to the station. She set it on the counter and opened it to a page near the back. She did not need to look for it. She knew exactly where it was. Page 173. Her grandmother's handwriting in blue biro. The letters were small and careful. The page had a small stain of palm oil in the upper right corner that had been there for 30 years. Grandma Nettie's chin-chin, with honey and ginger, served warm with a spoon of tiger nut cream. This was the sweet her grandmother made for every occasion that mattered. Weddings, homecomings. The night before Adaeze left Onitsha for Lagos in 1993. And, 28 years ago, the dessert Adaeze had chosen to serve at her own wedding reception in the compound of her family house. 240 guests, every plate cleaned. Chukwuma had told her that night it was the finest thing he had ever tasted. He had said it was the taste of the woman he had married. He had not said it again in 28 years. But he had eaten it every Christmas she made it. He would recognize it the moment his tongue touched it. She knew this the way she knew her own name. Adaeze pulled butter and flour from the cold room, fresh ginger from the prep shelf, honey from a small labeled jar on the top shelf that the pastry cook used for glazing, tiger nuts, ground fine, one of the few genuinely West African ingredients, cassava and palm kept in stock, full cream, vanilla, a small pinch of sea salt, a crack of ehuru, the calabash nutmeg her grandmother had insisted on for anything sweet. She laid everything out on the station in the order the recipe required. She did not measure. She did not need to. Her hands knew the amounts the way they knew the weight of a plate and the exact temperature of dishwashing water. She rubbed the butter into the flour with her fingers until it looked like fine, wet sand. She added the honey. She added the ginger, freshly grated on the microplane, so fine that only the fragrance would carry through. She worked the dough with the heel of her hand, only briefly. Her grandmother had always warned that overworked chin-chin becomes tough, and tough chin-chin has no place at a wedding. She rolled it out. She cut small squares, perfect, diamond-shaped, small enough to be delicate, large enough to be generous. She heated a small pot of frying oil on Station 6. She dropped the squares in, one at a time, so they would not stick to each other. They sank to the bottom and rose to the surface exactly as her grandmother had described, like they have decided they want to be seen. This was the moment that separated chin-chin made from a recipe and chin-chin made from memory. You could not set a timer for it. You had to watch the color and smell the change and lift the pieces at the exact second before the sugar in the honey crossed from golden into brown. She lifted them. She laid them on brown paper to drain. She whipped the tiger nut cream in a small bowl with vanilla and a whisper of ehuru. She spooned it into a small ceramic dish. She placed the dish beside a small mound of the warm chin-chin on a white plate. She dusted the whole plate lightly with icing sugar, the way her grandmother had done at every wedding in Onitsha for 40 years. The smell moved through the kitchen. Butter browned just past golden. The sharp warmth of ginger. The sweet weight of honey. And underneath it all, the strange, familiar, unforgettable perfume of ehuru. A smell you could not name if you had not grown up smelling it, but a smell no Igbo man over 50 would ever mistake for anything else. Blessing stopped plating. She stood at her station and watched. 2 line cooks looked over. Chef Tunde stood at the pass with his arms folded. Nobody said a word. Adaeze reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small piece of white paper. She had taken it from the reservations pad on her way through the pass. She wrote 3 sentences on it. She folded it once. She placed it on the plate beside the chin-chin. She did not show anyone what she had written. She set the plate on the pass. She looked at Blessing. Blessing looked at the plate. She looked at Adaeze. She picked it up without a word and carried it through the swinging kitchen door into the dining room. Table 9. The corner table. The main course plates had already been cleared. The champagne bottle was 2/3 empty. Ifeoma Bassi was looking at the diamond ring on her finger, turning it slowly under the candlelight. Chukwuma was leaning back in his chair with the look of a man who believed everything was going exactly as he had planned it. Blessing set the plate down between them. She set the folded note beside it. She did not say who it was from. She said, in the calmest voice she owned, "Compliments of the kitchen, sir, in celebration of your engagement." She smiled. She walked away. Ifeoma picked up her spoon first. She took a small piece of the chin-chin. She dipped it in the tiger nut cream. She tasted it. She closed her eyes. "Chukwuma, my love, you have to try this." Chukwuma picked up a piece with his fingers, the way any Nigerian man over 50 eats chin-chin. He put it in his mouth. He chewed slowly. He stopped. He held the second piece in his hand and did not bring it back to his mouth. The flavor moved through him the way a song moves through a room when you have not heard it in 28 years, but your body remembers every note. He had tasted this before. He knew he had tasted this before. He could not place where. Then he could. His wedding day. The compound of his father-in-law's house in Onitsha, February 1997. 240 guests. A young bride in a coral red gown. A grandmother in a white gele. A single sweet plate at the end of a long table under a canopy in the compound sun. He put the chin-chin down on the plate. He picked up the folded note. He opened it. He read it. "This is the sweet from our wedding. My grandmother made it for us on that day. I made it then. I made it again tonight. It has always been mine. Congratulations on your new beginning. Adaeze." He read it again. He read it a 3rd time. He put the note face down on the tablecloth. He did not touch the chin-chin again. Ifeoma looked up. She asked him what the note said. He did not answer. She asked again. He said it was nothing. She looked at his face and knew it was not nothing. She did not ask a 3rd time. 9 million naira. A dark brown recipe book. That was what Chukwuma thought he had left her with. He had thought he had left her with nothing. He had left her with her grandmother's handwriting and 28 years of knowing how to feed the people who mattered. This plate cost her nothing to make. The ingredients came from the restaurant's pantry. The recipe came from a book that fit in the bottom of a locker. The skill came from a lifetime of learning at her grandmother's side, and 5 months of standing in a kitchen where nobody owed her anything, and she had earned every single thing she now had. The plate was worth more than everything Chukwuma had taken. He just did not know how to put it on a balance sheet. He called the waiter over. His voice was flat. "Please, who made this dessert?" The waiter did not know. He went to the kitchen. He asked Chef Tunde. Chef Tunde stood at the pass. He wiped his hands on a towel. He looked at the waiter. He said calmly, "The dishwasher." The waiter carried the answer back to the table. Chukwuma sat with it. He did not ask a follow-up question. He did not ask for a name. He did not need to. He knew who was washing plates at Cassava and Palm. He had known for 8 days, since a mutual friend at the Ikoyi Club had let it slip at a Saturday tennis session, and he had told himself the information was not important. Now he knew, because chin-chin made from a recipe that had been in one family for 2 generations does not end up on a plate by accident in a restaurant where your ex-wife works. Ifoma watched him. She did not understand what was happening. She understood that something had changed at the table in the last 2 minutes, that the man sitting across from her who had been smiling all evening was no longer smiling. She put her hand on his arm. He did not respond. The rest of the dining room continued as normal. A couple by the lagoon window laughed about something. A group of 6 near the entrance ordered a second bottle of red. The busboy cleared plates from table 4. The hostess sat a party of 3 near the bar. Nobody in that room knew that the dishwasher in the back kitchen had just placed 28 years of marriage on a single plate and sent it to table 9 with a note that said everything and nothing at the same time. Adaeze was back at her station. Her hands were in the water. The rack was running. The plates were stacking. Blessing stood at the station next to her. Neither of them spoke. They worked side by side in the noise of the kitchen, and the silence between them said more than a conversation would have. Chukwuma asked for the bill at 10:14. It was 840,000 naira. He paid in cash from a black leather wallet. He left a 30% tip in an envelope on the table. He stood up. Ifoma stood up beside him. He placed his hand on the small of her back and guided her toward the door. He did not look toward the kitchen. He did not look through the porthole in the kitchen door. He walked out of Cassava and Palm into the humid Lagos night, and he did not say a word to anyone on the way out. Adaeze did not watch him leave. She heard the front door swing shut. She heard the dining room fill the space where his table had been with the sound of other people's conversations. She washed another plate. She loaded another rack. Chukwuma did not sleep that night. He sat in the sitting room of the house on Banana Island, the house that no longer had Adaeze's name on the deed, and he held the folded note in his hand, and he read it 4 more times before he put it in the inside breast pocket of his agbada. He did not know it yet, but the note on that table was the beginning of something he could not stop. Chukwuma Emeka Okonkwo did not go to work on the Monday after the proposal. He sat in the kitchen of the house on Banana Island at 6 in the morning with a cup of Nescafe he did not drink. The house was silent. Ifeoma had gone to her own flat in Lekki the night before. He was alone in the house that used to have Adaeze in it, every single morning before he woke up. He thought about the chin-chin. He thought about the taste. He thought about how he had known it and not been able to name it, and then had been able to. He thought about the wedding. 240 guests. A grandmother in a white gele. He remembered telling Adaeze that night it was the finest thing he had ever tasted. He did not remember saying it again after that night. He sat there, and for the first time in 28 years, he did something he had never done before. He traced backward through the dinners. Not all of them, that would have taken days, but the ones that mattered, the ones that had closed deals. The Ministry of Works contract in 2007, 22 million naira in the first year alone. Adaeze had made ofe nsala and yam pounded fresh in the compound for the permanent secretary and his wife and his personal assistant. The permanent secretary had told Chukwuma at the signing that his wife had not stopped talking about the pounded yam. The Ikoyi Private Estate Development, 2011. 4 billion naira across the project. The lead investor was a Lebanese-Nigerian gentleman who had never eaten Igbo food before that dinner. Adaeze had cooked ugba, isi ewu, and a very careful pot of pepper soup for a man who did not know what nutmeg from Calabar was supposed to smell like. He had learned that night. He had signed 2 weeks later. The Abuja Bridge subcontract in 2015. The Sokoto Governor's Aid Dinner in 2018. The Dry Port Land negotiation in 2020. Every deal he could remember had started the same way. A dinner Adaeze cooked. A room Adaeze set. A conversation Adaeze kept moving. His name was on every contract. Hers was on none of them. He had never connected those two things before. He had never needed to. The dinners happened. The deals closed. He took the credit the way you take air, without noticing, without gratitude, without understanding that it could stop. It had stopped. He had eaten out every night since the divorce. He had hosted 2 client dinners at a private room at Talindo's Steakhouse in Ikoyi. Both had gone well enough. Neither had gone the way the dinners on Banana Island used to go. Nobody stayed past dessert. Nobody called the following week to say their wife had not stopped talking about the pepper soup. The deals still closed because Chukwuma was good at what he did. But something was missing from the room, and he had not been able to name it until he tasted a small square of chin-chin at table 9 on a Saturday night in the dry season. Ifeoma Basi found the note on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after the proposal. She was not looking for it. She was taking Chukwuma's agbada to the dry cleaner. She reached into the inside breast pocket to check for a handkerchief. She pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. She unfolded it. She read it. She read it again. She did not ask Chukwuma about it that day. She waited 2 days. She watched him. She watched the way he sat in the kitchen in the mornings, staring at nothing. She watched the way he had canceled 2 client dinners in a row without explanation. She watched the way the man who had always been certain about everything had become uncertain about something he would not name. On the 3rd day, she asked him directly. She asked about the divorce. She asked about the house. She asked about the accounts. She asked how Adaeze had ended up with nothing after 28 years. Chukwuma told her the lawyers had handled it. He told her the arrangement was fair. He told her Adaeze had signed every document. Ifeoma listened to every word. Then she asked the one question Chukwuma could not answer. Chukwuma, if you did that to her, what will you do to me? He did not answer. She put the note on the marble kitchen counter between them and walked out of the room. She moved out of the small flat they had started sharing in Lekki Phase 1. She did not break off the engagement immediately. She simply stopped being present. She stopped answering calls on the first ring. She stopped staying overnight. The diamond ring stayed on her finger for 8 more weeks before she left it on the counter beside a glass of water and a house key. Adaeze had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. Chinedu Emeka Okonkwo, 29 years old, was an engineer. He worked in his father's firm. He had watched the divorce happen from the inside. He had said nothing. He had taken his father's side in the way a son takes a side when the alternative is losing his position. Ngozi Adaeze Okonkwo, 26 years old, was a marketing executive in Nairobi. She had been the closest to her mother growing up. She had cried on the phone for 4 days when the divorce was announced. Then she had gone quiet. Obi Chukwuma Okonkwo, 22 years old, was in his final year at a university in Cape Town. He had heard the story about the restaurant from his older brother. They did not know all of it. Chukwuma had told them what Chukwuma wanted them to know: that the marriage had ended, that the lawyers had structured a fair settlement, that their mother had chosen to walk away with what she was walking away with, that she was, at present, doing some catering work in Victoria Island, as if it were a small hobby, and not the 6 nights a week labor it actually was. Ngozi flew home from Nairobi in the 2nd week of the 3rd month after the proposal. She had not told her mother she was coming. She landed at Murtala Muhammad International Airport at 5 a.m. She took a taxi straight to Cassava Palm and sat in her car outside the restaurant for 2 hours until she saw the delivery van from the fresh fish market pull up. She saw the back door open. She saw a woman in a stained white apron help the driver lift a crate of tilapia off the back of the van. The woman had gray in her hair now. She had lines on her face that were new. Her hands were red from water. Her back was straight in a way Ngozi had never quite seen it before. Ngozi cried in her car for 11 minutes. Then she got out. She walked to the back door of the kitchen. She stood there. Adaeze looked up from the crate of fish. She saw her daughter. Neither of them said anything for a long time. Then Adaeze put down the crate. She wiped her hands on the apron. She walked over. She held her daughter. And she said one thing. "I am not ashamed, my daughter. Do not be ashamed for me." Ngozi did not say anything. She did not have to. Later that day, in the small serviced apartment on Adaeze Jones, Ngozi read the divorce documents. All of them. Every page. She sat with them for 3 hours. When she was finished, she looked at her mother and she said, "Mama, this is not right. And I am going to help you make it right." Adaeze looked at her daughter. She said, "No. You are going to eat dinner with me, and then you are going to go back to your life. What is right will come, but it will not come because we fight for it. It will come because we cook." Ngozi did not understand what her mother meant that night. She would understand it 4 months later. By the 6th month, Adaeze was no longer washing dishes. She had moved to prep cook 8 weeks after the proposal night. Chef Tunde had put her name forward. The sous chef had tested her on station work and passed her. 2 months after that, she moved to the line. She ran the sauce station. She ran it clean and fast and without mistakes. The kitchen staff had stopped calling her the dishwasher. They called her by her name. In a professional Lagos kitchen, moving from dishwasher to line cook in 6 months is not common. It is not unheard of either. It happens when someone arrives with skills they learned somewhere else, and the kitchen is smart enough to recognize it. Adaeze had 28 years of cooking behind her. She had a recipe book with 230 pages of technique. She had hands that knew heat and timing and flavor the way a musician knows a scale. What she did not have was professional language and professional structure. Chef Tunde had given her that. The rest she had already carried. Comfort Nabuife Nwosu was 71 years old. She had owned Cassava Palm for 18 of those years. She was one of the first Igbo women to own a fine dining restaurant on Ozumba Mbadiwe Avenue. She had opened it in 2005 with money she had borrowed from 3 different microfinance houses after the first 11 banks in Lagos had said no to a Nigerian woman over 50 who wanted to open a restaurant with no husband as guarantor. She had survived everything the restaurant business could throw at a person. And she had done it without selling the place, without changing the name, and without lowering the standard. Auntie Comfort had not spoken to Adaeze directly until the 6th month. She knew who Adaeze was. Chef Tunde had told her the story. Not the whole story. Enough. Auntie Comfort had watched from a distance the way she watched everything in her restaurant. Quietly, with attention, without rushing to a conclusion. She asked Adaeze to come to her office on a Tuesday afternoon before service. The office was small. A desk, 2 chairs, a framed photograph on the wall of Auntie Comfort standing in front of Cassava Palm on opening night in 2005 with the then governor of Lagos State. Adaeze sat across from her. Chef Tunde says you have a book. He says the book is better than anything he can teach you. Adaeze did not respond immediately. She looked at Auntie Comfort. Auntie Comfort looked back. 2 Igbo women who had both learned a long time ago that words cost something and should not be spent carelessly. Auntie Comfort told her what she had in mind. Not a promotion, something else. She had been looking at a building on Awolowo Road in Ikoyi for 2 years. A smaller property, room for 40 covers. She wanted to open a second restaurant. Not fine dining, casual. The Igbo food she had grown up eating in her grandmother's kitchen in Nnewi. Food she could never put on the Cassava Palm menu, because Cassava Palm was fine dining, and fine dining had its rules. She wanted Adaeze to run the kitchen. Adaeze sat with that for a moment. Then she reached into the leather satchel she had brought with her and took out the recipe book. She set it on the desk between them. Auntie Comfort opened it. She turned the pages slowly. She read the handwriting. She looked at the palm oil stains and the biro marks and the small notes in the margins in Igbo. She did not say anything for a long time. Your grandmother wrote this? Yes, Ma. She knew what she was doing. Yes, Ma, she did. Auntie Comfort closed the book and placed her hands flat on either side of it. She looked at Adaeze. I want this food on the menu of my new place, and I want your name on the door. Chukwuma did not lose his business. He did not lose his license. He did not face any investigation, courtroom, or public scandal. What he lost was quieter than that, and in many ways worse. He lost the people. Ifeoma left. His son Chinedu had watched everything from the inside for 3 months. He had watched his father hire new staff, cancel dinners, forget to return calls to old clients. He had watched a mutual friend at the Ikoyi Club stop inviting the family to Saturday tennis. In the 4th month, Chinedu accepted a job offer he had been sitting on, from an engineering firm in Nairobi. He told his father over the phone. The call lasted 6 minutes. His daughter Ngozi stopped calling. His youngest son, Obi, finishing his degree in Cape Town, extended his stay by 1 term, and then applied for a master's, and then applied for a job in Johannesburg. He did not tell his father any of it. He told his mother. Client calls still came to the office, but the dinners did not come to the house. Nobody came to the house. The house on Banana Island, 6 bedrooms, marble driveway, chef's kitchen, sat quiet. He kept the house. He kept the accounts. He kept every asset the lawyers had secured. He ate dinner alone every night in a house that had been built for entertaining. He ordered from a Lebanese place around the corner most nights. He ate it at the dining table, where Adaeze had once served ofe nsala for 8 men in Agbada and pounded yam by hand in the back kitchen. The table seated 12. He used 1 chair. The other 11 stayed empty. He had built exactly what he had earned, not what he thought he deserved. There is a difference. Most men do not learn it until the house is quiet and the table is set for one. 12 months after the divorce, Adaeze stood in the kitchen of a restaurant on Awolowo Road in Ikoyi and turned the gas on for the first time. The restaurant was called Nettie's Kitchen. The sign above the door was hand-painted. Deep green letters on a cream background. Simple. Clean. The building was small, 40 covers in the dining room, an open kitchen visible from the counter, a menu written on a chalkboard that Adaeze had lettered herself the night before. Casual Igbo cooking. The food her grandmother had made in Onitsha. The food Adaeze had been cooking her whole life for people who had never once asked where it came from. Auntie Comfort had put up the money. Adaeze had put up the recipes, the labor, and the 6 months of professional training that had turned a dishwasher into a line cook, into the head chef of her own kitchen. The arrangement was an equal partnership. Both names on the lease, both names on the CAC filing, both names on the business account at the bank. Adaeze had made sure of that. She had read every page of every document before she signed. She would never sign anything she did not understand, again, for the rest of her life. The recipe book sat in a glass display case on the wall next to the kitchen door. Dark brown leather cover, oil stains on the pages visible through the glass. Grandma Nettie Okafor's handwriting in blue biro and pencil. 230 pages of food that had been passed from one pair of hands to another across 3 decades and 2 cities, and one small service department on Adeniyi Jones, where Adaeze had kept it safe during the worst 3 weeks of her life. The book was no longer in her hands. It was on the wall, for everyone to see. That was the point. Blessing Oluwaseun Adebayo stood at the host station. She had left Cassava and Palm 2 weeks before opening. Adaeze had asked her to run front of house. Blessing had said yes before Adaeze had finished the sentence. She had new business cards with her name and General Manager printed under it. She had health insurance for the first time in 6 years. She had a title. Chef Tunde arrived at 7. He sat at a small table near the kitchen. He did not order from the menu. He told the waiter to bring him whatever Adaeze wanted to send. He sat with his hands folded and waited. When the plate arrived, ofen sala with pounded yam, served hot in a small clay bowl with a spoon of stockfish oil poured on top at the last second, he looked at it for a long moment before he picked up his spoon. He ate slowly. He nodded once. He did not need to say anything else. The dining room filled, every table taken by 8:30. People from the neighborhood, people who had walked past the building during the weeks of renovation and had watched the sign go up and had smelled something through the open kitchen window during the soft opening. The smell of palm oil warmed slow, the specific warmth of uziza, the strange perfume of ehudu, a smell that made them stop on the pavement and look inside. The smell moved through every room and out the front door and onto Awolowo Road. Ngozi flew in from Nairobi for the opening. Obi flew in from Johannesburg. Chinedu did not come. That is his own story and not the point of this one. 2 of Adaeze's 3 children stood in the doorway of the restaurant that carried their great-grandmother's name, and they watched their mother behind the counter, apron tied, hair pulled back, hands moving, plating food, calling orders, running a kitchen the way she had always run everything, with precision, with care, without ever asking for recognition. Ngozi had seen her mother in a kitchen 10,000 times before. She had never seen her like this. She had never seen her mother in a room where what she did was the reason the room existed. She walked through the dining room to the kitchen door. Adaeze looked up. She saw her daughter. Neither of them said anything. Ngozi stepped into the kitchen and stood beside her mother and looked out at the full room. They stood together in the doorway, a mother and a daughter. A room full of people eating food from a book that had survived everything, because the woman who had written it had known what mattered. And the woman who had carried it had finally found a place to open it. 9 million naira and a recipe book. That was what Chukwuma thought he had left her with. He had thought he had left her with nothing. He had left her with her grandmother's handwriting and 28 years of knowing how to feed the people who mattered. Chukwuma took the house. He took the savings. He took 28 years of her labor and structured every single account and every single deed so her name was on none of it. He kept every asset. He kept every account. He kept every document his lawyers had prepared. And he still missed the one thing that mattered. Some people spend their whole lives taking. They acquire the house, the accounts, the documents, the fleet, the offshore trust, the beneficiary designations. They believe that what can be written on paper is what counts. They believe that what a court can recognize is the whole of what is valuable. But they cannot acquire what somebody carries inside them. The way she cooks, the way she loves, the way she stands beside you at a state banquet and remembers the name of the ambassador's wife's youngest daughter. The recipes her grandmother wrote by hand in a kitchen in Onitsha that smelled of palm oil and dried crayfish and uziza leaf, and of something warm underneath that you could never quite name, but that you would recognize anywhere in the world for the rest of your life. The things that cannot be put on paper are often the very things that matter most. And by the time you realize it, the kitchen is empty and the table is set for one. If this story reminded you that what you carry inside you is worth more than what anyone can take from you, send it to somebody who needs to hear that tonight. And here's the question. If somebody took 28 years of your work, your house, your money, your name on nothing, and then sat in front of you at a restaurant celebrating a new life while you washed their dishes, would you make them one last plate? Or would you let them eat something they did not deserve? Leave your answer in the comments below, because this one is going to divide the room. One more thing before you go. This story is fictional, but the patterns inside it are not. Financial abuse in marriages is real. It is documented. In Nigeria and across the continent, it is more common than most people think. The invisible labor of women who run households, raise children, and quietly build their husbands' empires without recognition is real. It has enormous economic value that rarely, if ever, appears on any balance sheet or in any settlement agreement. If any part of this story felt familiar to you, know that there are resources available. Know that starting over at any age is not a failure. It is a decision. Protect your name on every document you ever sign. Know what you are signing. That is not distrust. That is self-respect. Subscribe for more powerful African stories that stay with you long after they end. Hit the like button if you believe that what you carry inside you matters more than what anybody can ever take. Share this with somebody who needs to hear it tonight. See you in the next story.